Ever stood under a sky so wide your secrets felt small? Here on the Cowboy Alex story, we ride the stories of the West Campfire truths, trail dust memories, saloon whispers. Gritty human, sometimes messy. Every tale is a horizon to chase. Subscribe, pull up a stool, and maybe find a little courage for your own frontier. New Mexico Territory, 1873. Arroyo Vista slept under a sky the color of rust. The cracked church bell gave a hoarse note that limped across the plaza. On the street, Jamie Mercer bled through his white shirt and into the dust. Heat kept rising even after sundown. Gunsmoke lingered like a bad thought. Cole Mercer dropped to his knees. He pressed both palms to Jamie's side. The blood came up warm and slick between his fingers. "Stay with me." Jamie's breath rattled. He tried to lift his hand. A small tintype slid loose metal, catching a shard of starlight. Cole caught it by reflex. A photograph of Jamie, smiling hat shoved back shoulder to shoulder, with a young Dene woman with a long braid and steady eyes. Jamie swallowed and said the words like they weighed a mile. "Whitmore's vault, ledgers, maps, they prove it." Cole leaned close. "Tell me where." Jamie's fingers pinched weak at Cole's sleeve. "Ojo Plata. He steals with paper." He coughed a bright string. "Promise." "I promise." Cole folded Jamie's hand in his own. The last breath went out of his brother as the bell scraped one more tired note, then quieted. The tintype burned his palm even in the night. 3 years took their time and still felt like a blink. 1876. The road in from Santa Fe to Arroyo Vista ran thin along the mesa like a seam the wind had worried for centuries. Cole rode alone with a sealed oilskin packet under his jacket. He did not ask questions about errands anymore. The courier's coin felt honest enough in the pocket, and a job was a job until it was not. Midday hammered everything flat. The air buzzed with flies and heat. A hawk rode the thermals high over Ojo Plata. The smell of crushed sage and dried juniper clung to his horse's mane. Cole drank from a canteen, tipped some to the gelding, closed his eyes for a blink too long. A scrape of horseshoes behind him, then 3 shadows folded out of the shimmer. They rode in a row and fanned to block the trail. "Afternoon," the one with the pox scars said. He looked comfortable in a bad way. "Judge Whitmore sends his regards." Cole let the canteen hang from his finger. "I do not know the man." "Hand over what you are carrying, and we might let you keep your boots," the second one said, teeth gold where front teeth should be. The third spit and watched Cole's hands rather than his eyes. "Trading is done in town," Cole said. He shifted his left knee to keep the gelding between him and the scarred man. The sun had moved. He took note of where the light fell on their guns. "Not today," the scarred man said. He lifted his pistol. Cole moved first. He fired once through his thigh holster. The scarred man folded backwards without a cry, and his horse danced sideways. The other 2 drew. The gelding screamed as a bullet punched through its shoulder. Cole threw himself clear, hit the dirt hard enough to knock the air out, rolled behind a knob of volcanic rock as bullets chewed at the stone. The second shot scraped his ribs. He felt it before he saw it. Heat like a hot needle, then wet. He kept count with breath. 1, 2. He leaned out and put the gold-toothed man down with a clean shot that cut his hat brim as it went through. The last rider pulled hard to the left and ran. Fear made him sloppy. He fired wild into the heat haze and never looked back. Cole listened to the horse heaving as it shrank into distance. He could hear the gelding trying to stand, then giving up. The smell of blood thickened. The wind had gone somewhere else. He pressed his palm to his side. Deep, but not a hollow point. He had seen worse. He told himself that, and it worked until he tried to stand. The world swam thin and watery. He took the oilskin packet out, checked the seal, put it back under his shirt. He started walking. The mesa cut ran barren and bright. Heat rolled up the rock face in sheets. He kept to the shadow of a low wall of basalt and counted steps to keep from falling asleep standing up. 30. 30 again. A fly worried his wound. He waved it off without looking. The taste of metal gathered at the back of his mouth. A dry creek bed opened like a cracked lip. He climbed down into it and followed the white stones until his thighs shook. A stand of juniper grew where the bed bent and threw a scrap of shade. He leaned against the flaking bark. Sap had a clean smell like something trying to live. He slid down until the world tilted. One thought arrived and would not leave. A vault, ledgers, maps. Whitmore had taught the town to call theft progress. Jamie had seen it on paper and paid for it in the street. Hoofbeats, at first like a thought, then like weather. Cole did not open his eyes. If it was the third man come back, then the day had chosen its end. "Be still," a woman's voice said. Low, dry, certain. "You bleed more when you move." Hands slid under his shoulders. A strap cinched his chest. He felt the horse under them, the sway, and gather the creak of worn leather. He tried to speak, and found sand in his throat. "Water later," she said. "Hold on." He opened one eye. Moonlight made her cheekbones pale. Long braid, a dress patched with careful stitches, and a sash with tiny beaded triangles. Dîner. The smell of pignon smoke and some bitter medicine rose from her hair and hands. "Name," he rasped. "Not now." She shifted her weight to keep him up. Something fell out of her pocket and flashed in the low light. A tintype. It hit a rock and skittered. The horse's hooves crushed the sand around it and kept going. Cole saw the smile before the face. Jamie, smiling like the person behind the lens, had just said something true. The Dene woman stood in the frame with him. The same braid, the same eyes. He tried to turn to look at her, and the world went to black where his vision had been. He woke to the sound of water. Real water moving over stone, not the kind the mind makes when it is thirsty. He opened his eyes to a ceiling of smoke-darkened beams. The light was thin and good. A narrow room built under a ledge of rock. One stone wall sweat with cool from the spring just outside. The air held cedar and boiled herbs. His side burned where clean cloth stuck to a fresh bandage. A low fire whispered. A pot chattered. His shirt hung on a peg washed and wrung. His holster lay on the table unloaded but oiled. The oilskin packet sat beside its seal unbroken. The woman moved from the hearth to a small table. She ground something with a stone. She was younger than he had thought on the trail, not a girl. A woman who had done work. There were tiny white scars on her hands and one darker line on the wrist as if a rope had taught it a lesson. She did not look at him when she said, "You are awake." "Looks that way." His voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. He tried to sit up. Heat flared from the wound and made his jaw jump. He eased back slowly. She crossed to him with a bowl. "Drink a little." Not a question. The taste bit at his tongue, then went sweet and held there with a trace of honey. His throat burned, and then opened the way a door opens when you remember which side you are on. "Where am I?" "Slot Canyon north of Arroyo Vista. Coyotes keep men away. Water keeps me." "How long?" "2 nights. Fever last night only. You live." It was a fact for her, not a congratulation. "Your name," he said. She looked at him for the first time with a direct look that made him sit still. "Maya Nez." He nodded, then stopped because his head had other plans. "Cole Mercer." "I know," she said. No surprise in it. She went back to the table. Her braid brushed her back like a black rope. "How?" "Same way I knew where to cut the bullet. Practice." He let that be. The sound of the spring smoothed the room. The pot bubbled. A fly traced the window, then gave up. On a shelf by the door, leaned against a tin cup, sat the tintype. Jamie's face looked out from it like the man was about to say something clever and make himself laugh. Maya was beside him in the frame with one hand hidden at her side and an expression that read as private to anyone who did not know her. The background showed the edge of the church in Arroyo Vista and a corner of sky that looked almost white. Cole pulled air past his teeth and held it. The room got smaller and larger at once. He lifted the photograph carefully. The metal was cold. A scuff along the corner where it had hit the rock on the ride marked it now a thread of bright in the dark. He did not ask the question right away. He set the tintype upright on the table between them where the light could find it. The spring talked in the yard. The pot clicked. The world hung there like a nail in a beam. Maya's eyes flicked to the picture and away. She wiped the rim of a cup with the heel of her hand. "Eat when it cools," she said. Cole kept his voice even. "You knew my brother." Maya did not answer that. She set a spoon by the bowl, placed it with care, and said, "Rest now, Cole Mercer." She said his last name like the town did when it meant the past and not the person. He let the spoon lie. "How do you know him?" he said, and there was no way to keep the gravel out of it. Maya stood still, a long heartbeat. She lifted the tintype and held it flat in both hands as if it could spill. Her mouth opened, then closed. He saw the way her fingers tightened on the edges until the metal clicked. The wind moved through the chinks and brought the smell of juniper. The spring ran on. Somewhere outside, a small stone fell into a larger one and made a hollow sound. Maya looked up and met his eyes. There was nothing soft in hers. "Eat," she said, "then we talk." He picked up the spoon. The bandage pulled at his skin. The tintype lay between them. The spring kept speaking. The wound beat in time. He ate. She watched him without watching him. The canyon held its breath and waited for the next thing they would say. The stew tasted of wild onion and something bitter that cleared the head. Cole ate until the ache in his side stopped clawing for his breath. Maya sat across from him. Her eyes went to the spring and back to the tintype between them. He came to Arroyo Vista with books and too many questions, she said. Her voice carried the rhythm of someone who had rehearsed telling it and had chosen not to. He listened more than he talked. He laughed when the old men argued names for the same hill, Jamie Cole said. She nodded. Jamie. She touched the edge of the metal as if it could bruise. He asked to map the stories. He said if lines are going on paper anyway, then let some of them be ours. Whitmore was there, Cole said, in the background, always. Maya's mouth flattened. He watched the way a man looks at a calf and sees leather. He brought a photographer once, said history needed a decent frame. She looked at Cole then. Jamie believed him. At first. The spring whispered. Cole let the water's light settle in his eyes for a moment. How long did you know him? Long enough to know his voice from a distance. She picked up the bowl and carried it to the hearth. Long enough for this. She took a small woven wrap from a shelf and undid the knot. Inside was a child's bead bracelet, blue and white and yellow, strung tight. She set it on the table beside the tintype. Her name is Sadie. Cole's breath caught. The room shifted in a way the canyon could not. He imagined Jamie's hands tying that bracelet and could not finish the picture. Where? With my aunt, north. Maya watched his face as if judging whether he would break something that could not be mended. He looked down at the tintype at Jamie's uncomplicated grin. He did not tell me, Cole said. It came out slow. Men do not always know when to speak, Maya said. No heat in it, just air. The world outside the door made a dry sound. Not wind, not water. Maya moved to the entrance and rested her palm on the lintel. She stepped into the light and stood still, looking down. Cole pushed himself up on one elbow. The bandage pinched, then settled. She came back with a handful of ash. Someone camped near the slot mouth. Small fire. Hidden under stones. Not last night, the night before. She let the ash fall back into her hand. Tiny black flecks clung to her skin. Pike, Cole said. You know his trail. He smells of tobacco that has been in a pocket too long. He meant it as a joke. It landed as a map. We do not have time. Maya tied the bracelet back into its wrap and slid it into the shelf. We never did. They moved without talking about whether moving was smart. She cleaned the wound again and packed a tighter strip of cloth. He found his shirt and shrugged into it with one careful breath. She gave him water in a tin cup and watched him drink. Outside, a canyon ran through its song like a handful of notes against the rock and seemed pleased at the sound. Cole reached for the oilskin packet. We need to see what is worth this much trouble. Maya nodded once. He eased the seal up with a thumbnail and peeled the wrap. Paper slid out. The smell of old ink and wax rose. There were land deeds with proper stamps and names that did not belong to the land. There were letters in a hand that favored show over sense. There were maps on onion skin with areas circled in a precise line. The margins held a second hand, neat and square. Moisture at 50 paces beyond the cottonwoods. Shallow grave markers near the north ridge. Notations that were not about ore. Maya tapped a circle that sat over a wash that only ran after cloudbursts. That is a burial ground, she said. That one is where medicine plants like the shaded stone. She touched a second circle. Her finger paused as if in prayer, then moved on. Cole held one deed up to the light. The seal was genuine. The date less so. A loop had been traced over with a second darker loop to turn a 7 to a 0. He forges dates, Cole said. He paints the law to fit the frame. He laid the paper down. The packet felt heavier the longer it lay open. Maya pointed to the neat square writing in the margin. Jamie wrote this, she said. I know his hand. Cole heard the small crack in his own voice and let it pass. The light outside thinned to afternoon. Shadows of cottonwood leaves moved on the floor like water. Cole read until the words stopped meaning and started poking. They showed a web that ran from Whitmore's desk to real land and real water. He rubbed his thumb over a corner until it warmed. Judge Pierce is in town, Maya said. He is not Whitmore's man. How do you know? Ruth Carver told me. She keeps a room for him when he rides circuit. Maya picked up a paper that listed amounts sent to men with titles and men with guns. Her husband Walter tried to move this rock and died under a horse. He did not fall. Ruth knows what killed him. She looked at the bandage at Cole's side. She is careful. You trust her. I do not trust men like Whitmore more than I trust Ruth Carver. It came out with the weight of a weighed scale. They packed the papers back into the oilskin and wrapped it twice. Cole slid it under his shirt again. He could feel the cool of the seal against skin. Maya took a cloth bag and filled it with small wrapped bundles that smelled of willow and something sharper. She checked the knife in her boot. She touched the small leather pouch that hung at her throat and then let it go. They left at dusk. The canyon's sides held the day's heat and let it go slow. A pale moon climbed early. The horse stepped sure in the sand and gravel and made the kind of noise that does not carry. They skirted the mesa's lip and kept low where the sage grew in clumps. Cole watched the trail for the shape of boot heels and found none fresh. It did not ease him. Arroyo Vista lay quiet under its rust sky. A few windows held lamplight. The silver dollar kicked a piano through the slats and made the night thinner. They tied the horse in a stand of rabbit brush and went in through the side path behind San Miguel. The cracked bell did not ring. Father Thomas opened the sacristy door with a small key and a larger welcome. "Not in the nave," he said. "Follow." He led them through a hallway that smelled of wax and old wine into a back room where a table held ledger books and a kettle. His hair had gone white at the edges. His eyes had not. He looked to the bandage and then away like a man who knows wounds and systems both. "You bring trouble," he said without accusation. "Whitmore brings it," Cole said. Father Tomas nodded. "You are both right." He poured water into a cup. "The judge you want is at Ruth Carver's. He eats before court now. He says the diner salts his eggs wrong." The priest's mouth tilted. "We will go," Maya said. "Not through the plaza," Father Tomas said. "Briggs's men are restless. They call it patrol." He reached under the table and drew out a folded shawl and a worn man's hat. He handed the hat to Cole and draped the shawl over Maya's shoulders. For the shape, not the cold. He paused. "You know you are marked." "No, you are." "What do you mean?" Cole said. The priest took a folded paper from a drawer and laid it on the table. A drawing that looked enough like Cole to cause trouble stared up with a flat expression and a price, wanted for the murder of a federal officer. "Pierce is that officer," Father Tomas said, "alive this morning." He did not fill any silence after. Cole kept his face quiet. "If Whitmore writes the charge, he writes the story." "Ruth knows how to read margins," Father Tomas said. "Go to her door and knock like a guest. She will know how to open it." He lifted his hand over them. He did not make a sign unless a person wanted it. He had known Maya long enough to know the difference. She bowed her head anyway. Cole let the blessing come to rest where it fell. They cut through an alley that smelled of horses and coal. The boarding house sat back from the street, with 2 lamps in the windows. Ruth Carver opened before Cole could knock twice. She had the look of someone who had slept on trouble and woken to the same. "Inside," she said. She shut the door with a firm hand, slid a bolt, and moved them into a parlor that held 3 chairs and a shelf of books. "You are taller than the poster," she told Cole. No smile. "This must be Maya." Maya inclined her head. "Ruth." Ruth's gaze snagged on the bandage and let it go. She wiped her palms on her skirt and looked toward the staircase. "Judge Pierce is sleeping. He rides hard when he rides." Her voice softened at his name and then came back. "Walter worked with your brother." She looked at Cole. He said the young man had a way of making a room listen without raising his voice. Cole nodded once. He did not trust his throat enough to add words. Ruth took a breath that looked like work. "Briggs is Whitmore's dog when he wants to be, and his shadow when he does not. The sheriff is ambitious for the wrong things. The men Whitmore keeps are ambitious for coin and the simple comfort of obedience." She laid a plain ring on the table. A secret sign was scratched inside the band. She tapped it with a fingernail. "Whitmore does not believe in God, but he believes in clubs. He wears their marks like armor." Cole looked at the ring. The inside cut read 82. "You keep souvenirs." "I keep edges," Ruth said. She took the ring back and slipped it into a drawer. "You can stay in the cellar until morning. Pierce will hear you then." Her eyes went to Maya's shawl. "If anyone asks you, are my cousin from Taos, and your husband is sour about the train." "Thank you," Maya said. There was a depth to it. Ruth's mouth twitched as if it wanted to lift and remembered why it had not. "Do not thank me until you leave my house alive. Come." She led them through the kitchen. A pot of coffee sat on the back of the stove and kept warm without boiling. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and soap. She lifted a trapdoor flush with the floorboards. Cool air rose. Stairs went down into dirt and stone. "Stay quiet," Ruth said. "The walls hear more than they should." They slid down into a room with a low ceiling and shelves of jars. The jars held peaches that remembered summer beans that waited and pickles that tried not to. A lantern burned low on a hook. There were blankets folded on a crate. The earth held the day's heat without letting it bite. Ruth set the trapdoor back 1 inch to let a stripe of air enter. "I will bring Pierce when the house wakes. Do not light more than this. If you hear boots above you, do not move except to breathe." She put her hand on the frame of the door. Her fingers were nicked and strong. "Ruth," Maya said. The woman looked at her. "Walter did not fall," Maya said. "No," Ruth said. The word had the shape of a headstone. She closed the door. The silence drew close. Cole set the oilskin packet on the crate and sat with his back against the cool wall. The dirt smelled clean. Maya stood for a time and then slid down opposite him. Between them, the lantern made a small gold lake on the floor. "You think Pierce will be different," Cole said. "I think he does not belong to Whitmore," Maya said. "That is a start." They waited. The sounds of a boarding house in the night layered the quiet. A stair complained, a door clicked, a laugh rose and fell. Cups met saucers, then stopped. Outside in the street, someone sang a verse and a half and forgot the rest. The song left its last note with the crickets. Cole slept without meaning to, and woke at a sound that did not fit. A weight on the trap door. A breath drawn near the wood. Not Ruth. He saw Maya's eyes open in the same instant, dark and clear. She put one finger to her mouth and reached for the knife in her boot. The trapdoor lifted. The lantern caught a slice of a face pitted with small moons. Boone Pike smiled into the hole as if he had found a thing someone else had lost. His pistol hung easy in his hand. "Evening," Pike said. "Judge Whitmore sends his regards." He tilted his head. "Come on up. Careful while you do it." He looked past them into the corners. Rats prefer the dark. Cole felt the earth at his back and the wound heat. He let the breath come back into his chest and then held it ready. Maya shifted her weight so that the lantern's glare hit her right hand. The cellar smelled of peaches and dust. Above the house held very still. Pike's smile stayed pleasant. His eyes did not. He tapped the barrel of his pistol against the wood as if marking time that the rest of the room could not hear. Pike's pistol rested in his hand like something he never had to think about. The lantern threw a hard line up the grain of the trap door up his cheek into the small pits that made his face look like a hammered pan. "Easy," he said. "No need to wake the house." Cole let his eyes drop to the floor for a blink just long enough to mark the cellar. Bins. Jars. A low heap of flour in a wooden trough. A darker square where the earth met stone. He breathed once through his nose and felt the ache settle in a place he could use. Maya shifted so the lantern's glare laid a stripe across her face. Her right hand drifted into shadow. Pike's mouth smiled. His eyes counted distances. The judge wants a word. Might even be polite. Cole brought his hand up, slow, palm open. Then he snapped the lantern wick down with his thumb. Darkness jumped. Pike's pistol barked. Plaster hissed from the wall. The cellar went to shapes and smell. Cole fired once at the square of night in the trap. A body hit wood. The pistol clattered. Above them boots moved. Then men shouted like a deck of cards thrown at a table. "Here," Maya said low. She kicked the base of the flour bin. The front panel shuddered and slid. Cold air breathed out of the black behind it, a flower chute, old as the house. They went on hands and knees. Flour smeared their sleeves and bit the back of their throats. The passage tilted down and turned. Boards creaked behind them, and a voice cursed. Maya pushed and made room for Cole's shoulders. He kept one hand on the oilskin packet under his shirt and the other on the pistol. The chute opened above a pit. They dropped the last foot into a small brick box and kicked at a hatch. It gave. Night air grabbed them by the collar. They spilled into a dark wedge behind the livery. The smell of hay and old sweat felt almost kind. Cole listened. The house they had left rang with boots and broken orders. No alarm in the alley yet. Maya wiped flour from her mouth with the back of her hand. Her eyes shone in the starlight, calm and busy. "Move," she said. They cut along a fence and slid into a run. Shadows kept their shape near the walls. A dog lifted its head and let it fall back on its paws. The piano at the Silver Dollar tried a waltz and failed. Somewhere a drunk told a joke to no one. The courthouse squatted on the north side of the plaza like a man who had eaten too well. One lamp burned in a narrow hallway. The side door was barred with a simple drop. Cole slid a knife between wood and wood lifted and felt it give. The door opened on the careful smell of ink and dust. They walked soft. Their boot heels found the grain of the floor without speaking to it. The marble tiles near the main hall carried a faint sheen like a thin river. Cole kept his hand over the pistol. Maya's palm pressed the small knife flat against her thigh through the skirt. Judge Pierce's door stood at the end of a corridor half open. The room beyond held the stillness of an interrupted prayer. A single lamp burned on the desk. Papers lay in a neat stack that had been pushed 1 inch out of square. The man in the chair had fallen forward and found the blotter, a dark fan spread under his cheek. Cole crossed the rug and stopped by the desk. The air smelled of iron and lamp oil. He put 2 fingers to the judge's neck and felt nothing. He looked at the window. The glass showed the faintest reflection of his own face, thin and tired, as if he were asking the pain for a different answer. Maya stood at the bookshelf. She looked at the spines as if they might speak. He did not fight, she said. Someone he knew, Cole said. He reached for the shade and did not touch it. The lamplight caught a smear on the edge of the desk. Gloves had grabbed paper and lifted. The space where a package might have sat held only air. Footsteps clicked in the hall. A man cleared his throat like a prelude. Judge Whitmore entered as if he owned the floor and the air above it. The gray in his hair chose its places. His coat fit as if a measuring tape had been worship. Sheriff Briggs followed hat in hand, face set at polite. Ruth Carver came last, with her hands bound in front with a strip of cloth. A bruise colored the skin under one eye. She was upright. She kept her chin level. Whitmore took in the room the way a rancher counts head across a fence. His eyes did not touch the body on the blotter for long. Evening, he said. A shame about Judge Pierce. A stroke, the doctor will say. The strain of the circuit. He let his gaze rest on Cole. Names are a comfort at a time like this, Mr. Mercer, Judge Cole said. He was aware of Maya at his shoulder, of the scent of boiled starch in Ruth's dress, of the slow drip off the edge of the blotter. Whitmore's mouth did not smile. You have something that belongs to the court, he said, to the people. Do I? Do not make me common, Whitmore said. I prefer this to be a conversation. He turned his head slightly. Sheriff. Briggs kept his hat in both hands like a man in church who had not decided what to pray for. He did not glance at Pierce. He looked at Ruth and then away. We can do this quiet, he said. Ruth answered him by not answering him. She looked at Cole. Her eyes said the thing her mouth could not. Whitmore stepped around the desk as if the blood were not there. He let the lamp catch the gold signet on his finger. The inside of the band carried a tiny scratch. Cole remembered the number Ruth had shown them and decided not to look at it again. The judge put his palm on the blotter, left it there, took it away. You took some trouble to crawl out of Mrs. Carver's cellar, Whitmore said. My man was quite put out. He is a simple soul, but he develops attachments. Pike should choose new work, Cole said. Perhaps, Whitmore said. We all come to a change of calling sooner or later. His eyes slid to Maya. He looked at her as if she were a fact that had to be noted and set aside. The child, he said. Sadie. Maya did not move, but air thickened around her. The child is a loose stitch, Whitmore said. Men tug at such things. I prefer clean seams. You can give me her location. I can see you out of this with a minimum of fuss. Mrs. Carver as well. Ruth let out one breath. It did not shake. Cole kept his hands at his sides. You want to trade a life for a lie, he said. Whitmore tilted his head as if listening for a distant train. I want to settle an account. Bring me the girl before sundown at my house. I will return your papers to the United States government with the proper solemnity. I will sign what must be signed. I will attend Pierce's funeral in my best coat. He paused. Or we can do this the frontier way. I do not recommend it. It stains. Briggs unrolled a folded paper and held it out without coming closer. The wanted circular showed Cole's face in indigo marks. The charge under it named a federal office and a date. The date was tonight. Convenient, Cole said. Truth is a flexible tool, Whitmore said. In time, the capital will see sense. Until then, we must endure the misunderstandings of distance. He looked at Maya. Do not think you can hide a child forever. 1 man in 10 will sell his mother for a nickel, some for a song. Maya's voice was calm. You do not know our songs. Whitmore turned from her, as if she had been a window that showed only light. He fixed his gaze on Cole. I do not need you both alive to have what I want, but this way is cleaner. I like clean. Cole felt the pull of the wound. He felt the cool weight of the packet against his ribs. He saw Jamie's grin in a metal frame and the neat squares of his hand in the margins. He did not look at Ruth because looking at her would put something on the table he could not pick back up. Briggs shifted. His boots sounded soft on the rug. He kept his voice for Cole alone. You cannot shoot your way out of this room, he said. Something in his eyes flickered and went flat again. Whitmore spread his hands as if opening a door. Walk out the back. Think. Come to my house when the light lands on the east wall. Bring me an address, or come with guns and see where the dust lies after. He stepped aside. Briggs took 1 half stride to the right to make space. Ruth did not speak. Her mouth pressed flat. Her hands were steady. Maya's shoulder brushed Cole's arm. He felt the touch and took it like water. They left by the side hall. The door closed with a soft click behind them. The plaza had gone quiet. Even the piano had given up. The cracked bell slept. They walked toward San Miguel without looking as if they were walking toward anything. A man in a bowler hat leaned in a doorway and watched the night as if he wanted it to behave. He did not see them. They were the shape of shadow. Father Tomas opened before they knocked. He seemed older in the lamplight and more certain. He locked the door behind them and set the bolt. He did not ask questions until he had poured water and put it in their hands. "Pierce," he said. "Gone," Cole said. The priest closed his eyes for a moment and then opened them. "Ruth." "Alive," Maya said. "For now." Father Tomas nodded and crossed to a cabinet. He took out a paper and a pencil, then paused and put them back. "You do not need drawings," he said. "You need what the house knows. The kitchen opens on the garden. The garden wall is low near the apricot trees. The servants' stairs do not creak all the way if you keep your weight to the rail." He looked at Maya. "The room over the east wing has a lock that yields to a thin blade. Walter showed me when he fixed a hinge." Maya listened the way a hunter listens to wind on stone. Cole saw her map it without moving. The priest reached for a small bundle on a shelf. He placed it on the table. Inside were bandages, a needle, a threaded gut, a vial that smelled like willow. He set a plain wooden cross beside it. He did not push it toward anyone. "You can sleep here until the street forgets your faces," he said. "The walls are thick." Cole shook his head. "The walls talk in this town." "They do," the priest said. "Some of them are tired of their own voice." Maya touched the bracelet wrap under her sash as if to make sure the knot held. "We will not leave Ruth," she said. It was not a promise and not an oath. It was a fact placed on the table. Father Tomas's mouth changed very slightly. "I will not say no." He went to the window and lifted the edge of the curtain with 2 fingers. The knight looked back without expression. Somewhere beyond the churchyard, a horse stamped and a saddle leather creaked. The priest let the cloth fall. He turned and set his hand for a moment on Cole's shoulder and another on Maya's. He did not say a prayer out loud. The oil in the lamp settled. The church boards kept their old secrets. In the quiet that followed, the first sound came softly. Knuckles on wood. Twice. Then once. The door shook a little under the bolt as if a heavy hand had leaned in to listen. Father Tomas lifted the bar with 2 fingers and kept his shoulder to the wood. The door moved an inch. A face filled the seam. Mendez, the grocer, with one bent ear, stared in and breathed fast. "They pulled men from the Bluff House," he whispered. "Steam blew at the yard. Sheriff ran that way with 4. Sounded like a boiler yelling." He blinked at Cole's bandage and at Maya's eyes and swallowed. "I did not see you." He backed into the night and was gone before the priest could answer. A low hiss rolled across town like a long exhale. Somewhere metal clanged against metal. The church trembled as if the bell had shivered in its sleep. Father Tomas locked the door and turned the key slow. He put a small parcel on the table without comment. Inside lay a coil of cord, 2 folded cloths, and a needle already threaded. He looked at Maya and then at Cole and said nothing more. They left by the sacristy yard. The night held its breath between adobe walls. They moved along the backside of gardens where apricot leaves clicked against one another. A cat ghosted across their boots and paused to judge them, then slipped under a fence. The Bluff House rose above the cottonwoods, with lamps throwing rectangles on white stucco. The garden wall at the rear came to Cole's shoulder, and no more. 2 guards sat where the kitchen steps met the dirt. One had a shotgun across his thighs. The other let his head hang until it bobbed. The smell of coffee gone bitter drifted from a chipped mug near the door. Maya touched the cord, and Cole nodded. He circled left into a stand of fennel and used the wind to hide the sound of his boots. The dozing guard lifted his chin and turned to follow the faint rattle of leaves. Maya's cord slid clean. His breath left with a soft surprise. Cole came in under the other man's shotgun and drove the knife up and in. He caught the body and let it down easy. They breathed. The kitchen door gave to Maya's hand. The room stood empty except for a kettle and a row of copper ladles that hummed a little when the door touched them. Rendered fat had cooled in a pan and skinned over like a small pond. Cole pointed toward the hall. Maya pointed to the stairs that went up through the servants' passage. They did not argue with their eyes. The study waited with its heavy desk and its bragging walls. Cole closed the door behind him and did not latch it. He stood 1 second and let the smells sort themselves. Ink, leather, a citrus oil that had been rubbed on the arms of the chair. He crossed to the portrait of Governor Kearney and lifted it. The bracket creaked. A black face of a safe stared back without interest. On the blotter lay a scratch pad with 3 digits written as if someone had written them without meaning to. 8, 2, 11. Cole felt the weight of Ruth's ring in his memory and turned the dial. 8, back past 0, 2, around again, 11. The tumblers welcomed the last number like a friend. The handle gave. The oilskin packet sat at the front as if it had wanted to be found. Behind it waited a thick folder with Mercer written across the tab in a different hand. Cole lifted both and flipped the folder back with his thumb until the contents found light. A list of names, a date, a staged arrest on cattle theft at dusk with 2 men to fire and 1 to call witness. A note in a small corner in Whitmore's close script. Be present. Cole did not know he had stopped breathing until his chest shook. He set the folder inside his shirt beside the recovered packet and shut the safe. He lifted the portrait back until the bracket took it. His palm left a faint print on the governor's painted coat. Footsteps paused at the study threshold. Sheriff Briggs stood framed by the door with his hat in his hand, and his revolver held where a man could see it and not yet fear it. That belongs to no one, Briggs said quietly, looking at the bulge under Cole's shirt. He stepped 1 pace inside and shut the door behind him with the heel of his boot. His eyes flicked to the desk and away. East wing, he said. 3rd floor. Ruth is there. A room with pale wallpaper and no rug. 2 men posted. Whitmore told them not to mark her face. Cole did not move. Why help? Briggs shifted the hat, and for a breath looked like a boy who had stepped wrong into work for men who kept their hands clean and their boots muddy. Because the story has teeth, he said. He lifted the gun just a little. You never saw me. You have 4 minutes before I am back to being who I am in this house. Cole went past him and felt the air of the hall. He took the servants' stairs and counted the turns with his fingers against the rail like a blind man. The narrow passage breathed stale bread and soap. On the landing, 3 floors up, light sliced under a door. A murmur of men who did not agree drifted through the crack. Maya's voice cut in quiet and flat. Cole eased the latch. The door opened a finger. The room showed itself in parts. Ruth seated, wrists bound to the arms of a chair, her chin up. A man with a dull coat held her shoulder in one hand. Pike stood near the window with his arm bandaged where a bullet had worked a lesson. He smiled toward the far wall and did not see Maya in the angle behind the wardrobe. She moved when he blinked. Her fist smashed his mouth and sent him into the window frame. The other man turned. She hooked the chair with her heel and dragged it against his shins to tangle his step. He fell sideways and reached for her ankle. She dropped like weight, and her knife found him where a rib left room. He let out a wet cough and lay quiet with his eyes on the plaster as if a map were written there. Pike brought his pistol up through a mouthful of his own blood. Cole fired before the barrel found a line. Pike jerked twice and slid down the sash. The glass rattled and caught itself. Cole stepped in and put a second look on Ruth. I can stand, she said. Cut me free. The knife took the cloth quickly and left threads. Ruth rubbed her wrists once and stood. She did not ask if they had what they came for. She looked at Cole's eyes and knew. Maya took the knife from the floor and wiped it with her skirt where it would not show. Shouts rose below like the start of rain. Boots hit a staircase. The house had found its own news. The balcony, Maya said. They went out into night air that smelled like apricot leaves and iron. The small roof over the kitchen sloped toward a low wall. Cole swung down first, then reached up for Ruth. She was lighter than her voice. Maya followed and closed the doors with a polite hand. Bullets chewed the edge of the roof and tore splinters from the rail. A lantern swung past an upstairs window and made the yard leap with shadows. Cole dropped the last feet to the garden and felt the bandage pull. He took one step and then another. They ran bent at the waist through trees and trimmed hedges and reached the far wall. Maya went up and over like a thought. Ruth climbed with help. Cole grabbed the top and started to haul. A pistol cracked from the dark near the apricot trunk. The round found the wet wound and pressed it open. Cole's legs went loose. He locked his elbows on the wall and swore once without sound. He felt Maya and Ruth pulling at his coat and then under his arms. He rolled over into weeds and lay on his back with the stars turning closer. Judge Whitmore came into the light of his own garden carrying his own gun. His jacket hung wrong on one side and a fresh bandage showed where cloth had been cut away. His face held no expression now. He walked to the fence and stopped 5 paces back where the lamplight died into shadow. You could have handed me paper in daylight, he said. You chose the dirt. Cole pushed himself to a knee. The blood was warm and intent. The gun in his hand felt heavier than a gun. You stood in the street when Jamie died, he said. You wanted the shape of it. Whitmore's eyes did not change. I wanted order, he said. He preferred noise. He lifted the pistol and sighted along it like a man in a yard aiming at a bottle. The woman can go if she tells me where the child sleeps. Maya stood to Cole's right with her body angled to hide him. She put one hand on the wall as if testing the stone for warmth. Whitmore's attention stayed on the barrel and the idea of it. He did not see the motion at the edge of his own shadow. Maya moved at the line between breath in and breath out. The knife slid into the space below his shoulder blade where bone makes a small shelter for a heart. His arm fired into dirt. The sound cracked flat. He took one step forward without his legs and found his knees. He looked at Maya's face, as if a door had opened onto a room he had not furnished. She held his gaze without speech. He tipped along the last inch of his pride and lay in his own garden with apricot leaves trembling above him. The night made a new quiet that held for a long breath. Ruth took Cole under the elbow and brought him up enough to move. Maya pulled his belt tight over the bandage until his sight narrowed and came back thin. They crossed the alley with a pace that would not bring notice to anyone who did not look for it. A lamp burned in a second story. A baby cried once and found milk. The world kept its other stories running. San Miguel received them with a dark door and cool air. Father Tomas met them with sleeves rolled and a basin ready. He did not ask for accounts. He set a chair under Cole and put a towel between teeth and pain. The needle went in and out. The thread pulled skin close. The priest's hand was steady and smelled of soap and wine. Cole stared at the ceiling beams and found the place where smoke had painted a line over the years. Maya sat on the floor with her back to the wall and her knees drawn up. Her hands had stopped shaking by the time the last stitch tied. Ruth stood with her shoulder on the jamb and watched the courtyard for shapes that did not belong. She held the oilskin packet under her skirt where the shape did not show. Father Tomas knotted the dressing and pressed clean cloth into place. "You will keep your feet," he said. "You will not lift anything heavier than your temper." He cut the thread and let himself breathe. Ruth stepped to the table. She looked at the packet and then at Cole. "I can take this," she said. "Now." Cole nodded. His mouth felt too thick for words. She tucked the oilskin into a canvas bag and covered it with a shawl. She set her jaw and looked taller. A boy tapped at the window with 2 knuckles and a guilty face. Father Tomas lifted the sash. The child passed him a yellow slip and ran as if the floor were hot. The priest read and let the paper rest in his palm. He glanced at Ruth and then at Cole. The line of his mouth altered and then set. He folded the message once and slid it into his sleeve. The cracked bell did not ring. The church held its breath. Outside, steam at the yard gave its last white whisper and settled into air. Father Tomas unfolded the yellow slip and set it on the table. Ruth read it once and lifted her eyes. The wire from Santa Fe named a federal man by title and hour and said he was already on the rails. "I will meet him," Ruth said. Her voice had its footing back. The priest strapped a plain pistol to her thigh and hid it under her skirt. He handed her a bonnet that had belonged to a woman who had moved north for a schoolhouse job. "The stage leaves before sunup," he said. "Briggs walks past the depot every morning to show he owns the ground. He does not." Ruth touched his wrist in thanks and looked to Cole and Maya. "Keep to the edges," she said. She did not waste words. She tucked the oilskin deep in a carpet bag and went out through the side yard with her head bent like any widow minding her steps. The cracked bell said nothing. Arroyo Vista held its breath and decided not to see. At dawn, the depot steamed and hissed. A riderless mule chewed at a rope and watched the world with long eyes. Sheriff Briggs stood with his hands in his pockets and his mouth careful. Ruth took her place without drama. For a heartbeat, his gaze caught hers. He did not nod. He looked away as if a bird had passed overhead that did not want to be named. When the driver cracked the whip and the coach lurched forward, Briggs did not call it back. The church smelled of coffee and hot bread. Father Tomas cleaned and bound Cole's side again and gave them a canvas sack with a kettle, a flint, 2 blankets, and a tin of salve that lived in a tobacco can. He opened his hand and let a small wooden cross rest in Maya's palm. She slipped it into her pouch with the willow bark and the herbs that smelled sharp and green. "You have a horse," he said. "You have your feet. Let them take you where the ground is quiet." They left Arroyo Vista by the arroyo under cottonwoods that drew straight lines of shade across the sand. By noon, the heat climbed and pressed on their backs. The world tasted of dust and old sage. Cole rode stiff, one hand light on the reins, the other on his ribs. Maya set a pace the horse could keep without breaking. In the shallow places where storm water had licked the rock and left it clean, their tracks shone gray for a moment and then dulled. They camped where a line of basalt broke the wind. Maya fed the fire with piñon sticks and a pinch of dry grass. The smoke rose blue and smelled like the inside of a good coat. She boiled water and dropped in willow shavings and a shred of something that made the steam bite at the eyes. Cole watched the stars, shoulder up against the dark. The tintype lay on the blanket beside him, The scuffed corner caught a spark and threw it back. "You knew before I asked," he said. Maya looked at the picture and then at him. "He had your laugh when he pretended not to," she said, "only longer." Cole turned the metal in his fingers until the faces went from dark to pale and back. The fire ticked. Far off, a coyote called and found an answer. He put the tintype away and lay back on the saddle roll. Sleep came as if someone had loosened a strap. They rode north and the ground changed by inches. Yucca spears stood like quiet soldiers. A hawk drifted on a slow circle over Ojo Plata and then moved off. In the late light, a wash showed itself as a silver thread and then vanished when the sun went behind a hill. The horse blew slow and regular. Cole's side ached without biting now. The salve on his skin smelled like winter. Near dusk on the third day, Maya lifted her hand and set it down. He reined in beside her. Below the red rock shoulder, a half-circle of brush shelters held the last of the day. Smoke rose straight light as a line drawn with a fine pen. A woman with a gray braid came out of the nearest shelter and shading her eyes with one hand. When she saw Maya, she lifted both arms and spoke her name as if it had been a long time and no time. Maya slid from the horse and went to her. They held each other for a breath, then another. The older woman's glance went to Cole, took his measure, and gave him a nod that was not unkind. A small child stood in the doorway and watched without moving. She had a solemn face and brown eyes that took in a full measure and a little more. "Sadie," Maya said. Her voice changed shape. She knelt and opened her arms. The girl walked into them and let herself be folded and breathed. When she stepped back, she looked at Cole, then at his hat, then at his hands. "I am Cole," he said, "your uncle." The word felt new in his mouth. He held his hands open and empty. Sadie came closer and looked up serious as a judge. "Candy," she said. He could not help the smile. "I owe you some," he said. She considered this and nodded once as if a contract had been laid down. They stayed long enough for the world to remember them. 2 nights and a morning and then another night. Cole learned the names for things he had seen and had not known how to say. White sage in the low bend. The plant whose tea quiets a hot head. The way to lay a fire so it eats slow. He carried water to where the children had drawn a circle in dust and were teaching a pup that shoes do not belong to it. Sadie warmed to him by inches. She stole his hat and put it on backwards and looked up to see what he would do. He tipped it right and touched the brim. Her smile came quick and then went shy. Maya told the ladies what needed telling and kept what did not. She slept with Sadie in her arms and woke with her hair full of burrs and a softness at the corner of her mouth she did not hide. Cole woke when the camp did, with the smell of blue corn and coffee in the air, and felt something he could set his back against that was not revenge. On the 4th morning, they saddled the horse again. The aunt tied a small bundle for Maya and another for Sadie and tucked a piece of meat wrapped in leaves into Cole's coat pocket like an old habit. Sadie climbed up in front of her mother and held the horn with both hands. Cole gathered the reins and turned the horse toward Red Rock and the idea of home. The Slot Canyon took them in and made them small. The air cooled. The spring spoke in its steady way under the ledge, and the lichen on the stone glowed like something alive. The cabin crouched where they had left it. The roof sagged at one corner. A plank on the east wall had pulled away from its neighbor, like a man falling out of line. The door needed a hand and got it. The room smelled of cedar and smoke and something clean. Maya set Sadie down, and the child went to the spring with her fingers spread like a small rake. She touched the water and laughed once when it darkened the dust on her skin. Maya stood in the doorway and watched, then crossed to the shelf and set the bead bracelet where the light could find it. Cole unrolled the blankets and shook them and tied his rolled coat to a peg. The knife went under the pillow without thinking. The afternoon had a quiet center. Cole climbed to the roof and pulled the loose shingles and saw which ones could be turned and which ones had to be thrown. He could smell the pitch in the cedar when the sun hit it. Maya brought a small pot to the ledge and warmed resin and stirred it with a stick until it thickened. He knelt and spread it along the seam where the rain would try to come in. The work put heat in his shoulders and steadied his head. Sadie carried 3 stones from the spring and set them on the threshold in a row, then moved them and made a new row. She told the stones where they belonged in a language that had no doubt. When the light slid low on the west wall, Cole climbed down and spread his hands for her. She held up her arms and he lifted her to the bench and sat. Her hair smelled like sun. Inside, the tintype found a place on the shelf above the hearth. The scuffed corner showed the new mark. The faces looked out at the room and did not seem to mind where they had been set. The folder marked Mercer rested under the bed wrapped in cloth. It did not show. The sound of water at the door folded into the crackle of a small fire. Smoke rose and braided itself into the rafters and marked the wood just a shade darker than it had been. Maya stood over the pot and stirred slow. The stew held rabbit and onion and a pinch of something she would not name. Cole watched her hand and felt the pull in his side and smiled when she pretended not to see him watching. Sadie climbed into his lap and leaned back and reached for the spoon when it came her way. The spoon was heavy with carrots and broth, and she managed most of it. When they had eaten, when the bowl had been rinsed and turned upside down, when the horse had been rubbed and turned in the little space they had for it, when the last light had turned the canyon walls to a soft red, they stepped outside. The air carried the resin smell of juniper and the metallic cool that comes only when rock lets go of the day. A wild horse stood for a moment on the rim above a dark cutout against a sky that was nearly blue again. It lifted its head and tasted the wind, and then it was gone with a sound like a shirt shaken out. Maya's hand found Cole's. Her fingers were strong and sure. She looked at the spring, then at him. The tintype and the bracelet and the sound of water held the room behind them. Sadie tucked herself under Maya's arm and yawned so wide her eyes went to half moons. "We are here," Cole said. Maya nodded. "The water is good," she said. Cole breathed in and let it go. The canyon took the breath and kept it with the rest. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.